We'll share my screen for just a moment, and then I'll introduce our amazing guest speaker today, bringing some good information around apartments. So I'm going to share. Okay, I'm going to share my screen and going live. We are excited to announce our featured speaker today, Nik Kitson, who is also in the DFW area and will be presenting on multifamily broadband. And so I'll introduce him in just a moment. Before we get started, this meeting is not a solicitation for any specific deal. This is not financial or legal advice. It's simply professionals sharing what we do and helping others to get involved in apartment investing. I want to announce our speaker for next week as well. Our speaker for next week is Chris Griffith. I think I have some so our speaker today is Nik Kitson, Broadband for Profit, and our speaker for next week is Chris Griffith. A little bit about Eagle City Multifamily, and part of the reason for we put these shows on is just to get to learn to know you better, and maybe we can work together in the future. If you have deals, bring them to us. If you are interested in investing in deals, we bring deals available for investments, a couple deals a year, basically. So from time to time we do. And I'll introduce the Eagle City Multifamily, Asif Kumar. He's here in the DFW area as well. Nikki and Sanjeev Mall are part of the team. They're on the call with us as well. And we're excited to announce our very special guest today. Nik Kitson has been a real estate investor for over 20 years in both multifamily and single family investments, successfully invested in over 2,000 doors and growing. Previous experience in the technology companies, having successfully founded, raised, and sold a wireless technology company. This duo brings a wealth of experience in applying technology to a value-add real estate strategies. So welcome, Nik, and tell us a little more about yourself and your topic.
Thanks, Herb. So I will just get the slide share up here. And there we go. So we'll tell you a little bit about what I do and a little bit about Clarity Capital, which we formed around our multifamily business. So I've been in the tech space for more than 24 years. So worked for a lot of wireless companies and founded our own technology company back in 2015, which we exited a couple of years ago. For almost that entire time, we've been in single and multifamily. As you could probably tell from the accent, I'm not from around here. Originally from New Zealand, and I've settled here in Dallas, Texas for the last 10 years or so. So we've been actively involved in multifamily for the better part of about 7 years now. And as mentioned, in over 2,000 doors today. And our key is really value-added multifamily investing strategies. And so today, I'm really going to talk about the different types of options that you can have for broadband. It's often now known as the fourth utility. So you've got, gas, water, electricity, and they're great and essential, but broadband is now so fundamental to our way of life that it's become a vital differentiator for multifamily investments. So let's take a quick run through what's in it for tenants, what's in it for operators. So if we start on the tenant side, it's really an absolute mission critical amenity. Your tenants either have it on their cellular plans or in their actual apartments, or both. And a lot of them, the vast majority of their usage is actually in their apartments. Cell phones are increasingly less desirable because of their usage limits and so on, especially with the tenants that we would traditionally put in our Class B and C properties. It's being used extensively for education and remote work. So that remote work aspect has become a really big deal since COVID, really. Now that that's over, we're still seeing something like 60 to 80% of people are still doing hybrid. There's very few that are full-time actually working at their place of work. They're doing a significant portion from their home. And what we see in our tenant base across certainly Class B and C, and it's a little bit different in Class A, but in Class B and C, we're seeing they get their core source of their income through connected systems. So they're advertising on Craigslist. They're using online forums to gather business and online apps to accumulate income, because a lot of these tenants are working in smaller businesses. And kind of the last piece on the tenant side is, it's all very great to go and order a telco service from, say, Spectrum that works inside your house, inside your apartment. But what happens when you're outside of the pool or the barbecue or the dog walking park or any of the amenities that you have installed outside, even your front office, having an instant sign up community Wi-Fi is a huge benefit. So making sure that it's outdoor and it's in all of the places where you have deployed amenities, the gym, the laundry, the pool, the barbecue area, all of those places is absolutely critical to the tenant experience. So on the operator side, so you own your multifamily, one side of the coin says broadband's just a cost, the other side said there's significant benefit. So one of the things you can generally do is, instead of billing for it individually, you can just roll it into the rent. So broadband directly drives your NOI. So NOI directly drives your capital value on exit. So if you don't have broadband today, this is one of the fastest investments you can make to generate value to sell your property. Almost no other investment can be executed in the same time and produce a near instant benefit in terms of that NOI. The second piece for operators is rent collection. You would never think, because it's just frankly not humane, to turn off gas, water, or power. It's not legal, it's not humane, you'd never do it. But turning off the internet, believe it or not, is often used as a sort of a last resort. It's perfectly legal, and it really drives rent payments like you would not believe. So if you want to get your on-time rent way up, because you're not really writing your business case on late payment fees. What you're really writing your business case on is making sure everyone pays their rent. You can leverage Wi-Fi to make sure that rent gets paid on time. And you're only inconveniencing them by maybe making them go on their cell phone plan for a day or two. But at the end of the day, imagine all of the teenagers in your house saying, "Pay the rent, I want my broadband back." You've got a pretty significant driver there to get that rent collection up to where it needs to be. And we see that as an enormous benefit that is very common across the operators in the B and C side. And then probably more Class A type properties, your very new builds. Wi-Fi on broadband is a foundation for smart services. Now, I'm a big believer in only deploying smart services where they make money. So there are very, very few smart services that I would personally recommend. But when you get into Class A type properties, keyless entry for things like remote access for viewings, that's actually a pretty common use to do smart door locks. When you're looking at energy management services, so there's a whole host of advanced services that may or may not make sense, but they all start with having broadband access universally across your property. So that's kind of where we start from a tenant and an operator perspective. There's clear benefit there. So now I kind of want to get into, what are our options? What would you do in terms of choices from A, B, and C? And I've made it pretty simple. In my experience, there are three primary strategies that you would employ, and they'll make sense for different types of properties and different scales of properties. No one of them is better than the other. They're just different. And so what I'll go through is each of these three and give you some insight into where these can be leveraged for success. So the first one, self-build. Pretty obvious what that is. You purchase your own Wi-Fi equipment, you hire someone to build that into your premise, and you essentially operate it as your own provider. So this has significant benefits in that you're going to get the largest possible margin on service, but you're going to put up with the most amount of sort of headaches for that, because you'll have to essentially operate that infrastructure with the help of a third-party support contract. And you can buy that kind of enterprise equipment today. And frankly, all of the other options that are there are using something like this, but they're providing a service wrapper with it. But a company like Ubiquity Networks is kind of the standard. If you've ever been to a hotel or a camping ground, in almost every case, you're going to be using one of these types of infrastructure. And so it provides extremely reliable, extremely profitable, but somewhat technically complex operation for your apartment. And kind of the emerging area down the middle is hiring a technology provider to do a turnkey solution. So the economics of this look completely different. Number one, you're doing a subscription based on every individual apartment you have, and you're paying, a proportion of that revenue out. The advantage of these tech providers is you don't just get broadband, you can get a whole host of other things. So if you want a smart energy solution, or if you want camera security, or you want all these value-added services, many of these providers have those sorts of packages as well. And the basic business model is you sometimes purchase the equipment. So some of these providers have absolutely no capital and they require you to buy it outright, and then they charge a subscription per user. And some of them are pure subscription-based players. And depending on the size and the business model they have, your mileage may vary. But there is a burgeoning group. And then on the other side, it's probably the more familiar piece. Zero money down. And it's just purely a subscription. You call up the likes of Spectrum, AT&T, Verizon. They provide 100% of the equipment. You never own it. You never operate it. The most you ever do is just call up and say how many you want. Or in some cases, they even provide a portal for you to manage the broadband service if you're rolling it into your rent. And so I'm going to work through these three models in terms of what are the benefits of each, and ultimately, what is the NOI, or what are the economics that sit behind this for you as a multifamily operator or investor? So if we take a quick run through the benefits of each strategy. So in terms of self-build, that's where I'm buying all of my own equipment. So clearly, this is the highest CapEx option. You're going to be spending to put an access point or a Wi-Fi AP in every single apartment. You're going to be cabling the entire facility. You're going to be doing underground cabling between premises, kind of parallel to some of your plumbing. Believe it or not, it's not all that hard to do, but it is something that is done by a specialist installation crew. And then when we talk about the tech providers and the telecom, the money just keeps going down. You need very, very little CapEx. So if you're struggling with cash flow, or you don't have the asset base to go and drive your own self-build, it's pretty clear you can do the telecom side. And there are instances where you'll have a contract bonus where it won't just be low, it'll be negative. They will pay you money to take their service for a fixed contract period to knock others out. So that's highly advantageous for you if you're really looking to get something in there kind of quick and you don't necessarily have the CapEx. And in terms of the NOI, it pretty much reads the opposite, right? So the best NOI, the best net operating income that you can drive is nearly always self-build. It's rarely the other two at almost any size of property. And then, tech providers, they take a share of every single unit, and the telecom operators typically provide the absolutely lowest return because they're providing everything for you as a complete turnkey service. For those tax people amongst us, when you own the asset, you depreciate the asset. IT equipment depreciates over 3 years. So whatever investment you place inside this, you can write it off in 3 years with a book value of 0. Typically on most Wi-Fi equipment. Now, obviously, you'd need to clear all that with your CPA and your tax accountant, but that's the typical approach that's used. So the secondary advantage is you're going to get some kind of depreciation benefit from your cash flows, which you generally don't get from your tech provider or your telecom provider. So tenant portals are pretty key. So I mentioned before, the number one piece for getting your rent paid on time is turning your Wi-Fi on and off and having a simple mechanism to add subscribers that your front office can do, right? So in self-build and tech providers, you always get that portal, but it's very, very rare in the telecom space. They're basically treating you like a wholesaler, and they have the relationship with your tenant, typically not you. There's a few exceptions to that emerging, but it's not particularly beneficial for you to leverage that to get your rent paid or provide community Wi-Fi and things like that. And in terms of performance, this is kind of the really big differentiator. The absolute worst performing solution from all markets, all size properties, is the telecom service, because they're putting a very small untuned box in every single property, and they sort of all conflict with each other, and you get really crowded Wi-Fi. So the more spectrum boxes you have, the worse it gets. And that problem gets worse and worse and worse as your properties get bigger. When you go with a self-build or a tech provider, both of those organizations use a single set of Wi-Fi infrastructure across your entire property, and they all work perfectly with each other. So your speeds are up to 10x what you would achieve by buying spectrum. And so very, very important in Class A, not as big a deal in Class B, C. But the second piece of performance is kind of the clean install. When you have a self-build or a tech provider service, it's all installed behind the soffits, behind the walls. You see nothing. It's extremely clean, and it looks very professional. When you see a telecom build, you know spectrum's been there. There's holes in every wall. There's glue everywhere, and there's cables all over your property. It truly looks terrible, and it kind of is. And it does create small issues for maintenance later on, because they just punch holes wherever it's convenient. And it does have a high cost of failure, even though that's somewhat borne by the telecom operator themselves. And then probably the last piece in terms of benefit is in terms of self-build, most operators would maybe think about adding security, but once it gets beyond adding security, it's usually well outside the capabilities of an operator to manage. And then if they wanted to sell, again, it's not worth putting a whole tech package in. But if you're buying from a tech provider, you can continuously layer on new value-added services. So some of those, like energy, save you money. They reduce your HVAC bill. And they can be materially significant in markets with very, very high costs of heating or cooling. Security is things like door security, but also property security. So you can put in cameras, you can put in various types of door lock and security, and remote tenant services for kind of keyless entry approaches. If you're trying to substantially reduce the amount of staff, or you have a very high turnover, say an Airbnb kind of style with shorter term rentals than your traditional kind of 1 year plus lease that we would do in most multifamily. But the tech providers allow you to embrace all of those income streams in a way that the telecom operators and the self-build guys do not.
Or I invested in it because of that.
Is there a question there?
Investigated in securities firm that offered a service to people investigating money managers. And they gave them a clean bill of health. But even after that,
I'm only hearing portions of that question. I'm sorry. Could someone repeat that for me?
I couldn't see who was speaking. DeLorean, was that you? I see you're unmuted. Donna Reed. Okay, I can't see who asked the question. Go ahead and speak up or put your question in the chat. Either way works.
I'm going to be having a question session shortly. So the goal is to give everybody a chance to speak, but you're welcome to stop me in the middle. Ideally, if you just put your hand up in the app, we can kind of see you bounce up in the discussion.
Okay, Donna Reed, was that you? I see someone posted that it was you. So go ahead and ask your question.
Sorry, I just came in the room. I don't have a question.
Oh,
I'm
okay.
looking forward to
Sorry
hearing
about that.
more. Thank you.
Okay.
Okay, so moving on, these are kind of the intangible benefits, but everyone here is looking to profit from broadband. So kind of what do the numbers look like? And this is what I've put together here to give you a typical set of cases across all three investment types. So as I mentioned before, the CapEx is the big differentiator in terms of how do I start this? So a self-build is typically about $1,000 per door. It can go down if you do very large builds, or if you share access points, 1 to say 3 apartments for a very low level of service, all the way, up to maybe $1,500 for a premium piece where you're putting ports all through your infrastructure. Your tech providers, some of them charge nothing, and they basically give you that wrapped into the subscription. Others charge you a CapEx component and then just charge a software fee on top. So it's all across the map with tech providers, and every provider will be completely bespoke, which makes it really tough when you're trying to compare them. But you can kind of look at the actual free cash flow you get from each, and that's kind of the stake in the ground that I typically look at. And the vast majority of your telecom operators is no money down. So your Spectrum, your AT&T, and your Verizons, they put no money down. Sometimes they'll pay signing bonuses, so you'll actually get cash in hand, or at minimum a credit, depending on the market. It could be cash or it could be credit, with which to typically pay several months worth of tenant leases for each service. The downside is if you have 100 apartments and you sign a contract for 100 apartments, you're going to be paying 100 apartments worth of fees no matter what. Whereas the self-build and the tech providers, you can scale it up and scale it down as needed. So it's very good in terms of being responsive to how many subscriptions you actually have. The second line there, the property OpEx, this is where you can really stretch your legs. So the self-build is a fixed fee. You pay for a large service that you share to each property once. So if you have 10 apartments, 50, 100, 200, 400, all to one property, you're really sharing one very large commercial service, and your profit actually goes up the more people you have on it. So it's a significant benefit to you, and that's where kind of the self-build, the bigger you get, the more benefit you get. And every dollar you put in of CapEx typically returns $4 to $5 of exit value. But it's not an unlimited pool. You can't just say I'll spend $5 million and get 25. A Wi-Fi build only consumes so much capital, and it's typically $1,000 a door. You multiply that by the number of doors, that by 5. That's roughly the number you're going to get as your exit capital value. Just sort of rule of thumb formula. With a tech provider, every customer you have, every apartment's going to be maybe 50% rev share. So they're going to charge, say, $80 to your tenant, and $40 goes to them, and $40 goes to you, as an example. And in the telecom space, they take a much higher proportion typically than your tech providers. And so when you kind of work that through to what's the NOI I can expect out of every apartment, you'll get the highest amount typically from self-build. A pretty wide range from your tech providers based on their business model and their service offering, and a slightly higher range from your telecom operators in general. And then you work that through to your value, and I did it on a 6 cap. Everyone's going to have a different property, but I had to use a number for something, so I used a 6 cap and the NOI generated under these examples, and you're anywhere from 2 to 12K per door is your typical exit value you would expect on a sale for a 6 cap by putting broadband in. And these are your direct, this is money in the bank when you sell your property, but there are some indirect gains that are highly beneficial to kind of look at when you're underwriting or when you're looking at how to manage your asset. So your economic vacancy, so that's something that you're going to potentially reduce a little, and you're going to have a depreciation kickback there. So your depreciation is a direct taxable benefit. And likewise with your tech provider with economic vacancy, as subscribers fall off, you're not incurring the cost, right? But with the telecom service, whether or not you have tenants there, you're going to be paying for every individual apartment. So there's a significant benefit on the economic vacancy as different seasons, you might be 5 or 10% off full vacancy, but you're not paying for those 5 or 10% tech packages to the telecom provider if you're a self-build. And with the tech provider, you've got potential income streams for the value-added tech. So, you may be able to charge a premium for security. You may be able to charge a premium for keyless door entry and remote tenant access and those sorts of things. They're all variable, and every asset will differ in how they approach those. And so, really, that's it for the quick intro. Now, I understand a bunch of people are going to zoom off to Brad's call at 7. I'm going to open it up for questions, and really just how can I help you to be successful in this space? I've got nothing here to sell you. This is just purely advice, and happy to take any questions you may have.
Nick, could you give a little example of the value add that you were talking? I know you went through it and I understand it, but maybe somebody that's not great at math. So
you mean value adds for tech packages?
Yes, like the sale value that it adds to a building.
Got it. So, math wise, if you can achieve the first one, $60 per month. So the simple math, the formula there is you work out what that is for a year. So 60 times 12 is $720, right? And if you divide that by the cap rate, or 6%, then that works out to be $12,000 per door based on that revenue stream that you've generated there. So that would be the price that you would be adding to your value. So if you had 100 doors at $12,000 a door, you can kind of work out the math there. 10 doors would be 120,000. 100 doors would be $1.2 million. And if we go back to the capex per door, $1,000 per door times 100 doors. So that's $100,000 you put in to generate an exit value of 1.2 million.
Thank you. Yeah, that adds some clarity to the picture for some people.
So not many investments in multifamily. You can tip in 100,000 and get 1.2 million out almost immediately. Typically, you'd have to wait several years to bump rents up and things like that. But typically, this can be turned in less than a year. But you can't tip 5 million in and get 20 million out. It doesn't work that way because there's only so many doors you can put broadband on. It's only worth so much. So the only way to scale this is to acquire more doors and add this amenity to it.
All right. So we'll open it up to anyone on the call for questions. Please ask questions about this broadband service, tech packages. Anyone, you're welcome to unmute yourself, raise your virtual hand, or post in the chat. I get the chats here. I can see your questions. Go ahead and raise your hand. If we can see you, we'll, Tony, you're unmuted. Do you have a thought, a question?
Yeah, I think this is great information. Thank you, Nick, and others for bringing you to the call today. So let me give you a little background and see maybe what you would recommend for a situation I'm in. Mm-hmm. We closed on a 41 unit property April 28th, and I inherited a Ubiquity system. Mm-hmm. And it's older stuff, and I'm fighting with it a little bit. Obviously the seller said, yeah, no issues for years and years, 7 years. But I'm finding that I have a few glitches here and there. There is a partner that's working with it. They kind of hold me hostage with a portal that they have access to reset devices, and they have the master admin. So I'm trying to debate what I'm going to do. Clearly, if I could find another partner, that might be a way to go and just start fresh with a new relationship and a new contract. I'm technical, so I've been managing it myself, but it's always good to have a phone number to call in case I need some, assistance. So that was my first question, is really what would you do there? And then I had kind of an ancillary question of how many megabytes per unit, per second per unit do you look at? So this current installation is 100 megabyte. It's fiber connection. I could lift it up. So far, I've not really seen it's been an issue, but it's only about half full. So for context, it's a old motel that somebody converted to apartments and just really didn't manage it well. So we're lifting it up further to about 90% full.
Well, is it still a motel or is it a multifamily sort of more long-term lease?
We're moving it to long-term.
Okay, so the challenge with motels is nobody uses plugs ever, but in multifamily, just about every family has the need for one little cabled thing. So the premium kind of package is installing one cable in the wall and Wi-Fi on the roof. So that's what I would do for Class A if you really wanted to go big. But if you're okay with just Wi-Fi, the asset you have is your cables in the wall. That is by far the most expensive, hardest thing to put in. And to swap out your equipment is nothing. You can do that for $80 per device. And you could get the latest, greatest, and just buy a pack of them and have someone install them in probably a morning. And most of your problems would go away. If you don't wish to have their portal, you can buy a portal in a box for that level for a few $100s. And you can take full control of it. And there are literally thousands of online providers that could service this remotely for you. And there are on-demand or sign up on an annual support basis contract providers in just about every city in the US that do exactly this, managed ubiquity networks. So it's pretty easy to get yourself away from that provider if they're not meeting your needs. But just remember, your cable is your asset. The little boxes on the end are infinitely replaceable and very inexpensive.
Yeah, they've put Wi-Fi antennas outside of the units, probably every third door, I would guess.
Okay.
So it's, for the most part, it works, but every now and again, I get a message from a tenant that says, hey, at night from 7 a.m. or 7 p.m. to 7 a.m., I'm running into some, it dropped or I had to use my own hotspot. So I'm just trying to resolve these issues that really don't have easy data to know what to do, because you look back at the portal and you can't really see. So my next thought is, after updating all the software, which was years old, is really replacing hardware. So that's, maybe as a solution. I don't know if it's antennas or if it's the consolidation boxes, the switches, but yeah, good feedback. Maybe I can find another partner that's a little bit easier to work with locally.
Yeah, well, feel free to reach out to me on that one. I use Ubiquity at home. I use it in motels and multifamily. It's fantastic gear, and it's very easy to get it to the model that you like and to get the reliability up. I typically recommend, if you're really trying to grow the value of your asset, you put an AP in every property and every apartment. I don't recommend the outdoor versions. That's kind of a quick way to do it, but it's what I would do for Class C or the bare bones minimum capital investment, because you work out how much they did. 40 doors divided by 3, because it's every 3 doors. They spent about $15,000 on it tops.
Yeah. So maybe that's what we do, is lift it up at some point. So, okay, good information. Thank you.
Thanks, Tony. Great question.
All right. Anyone else? Any questions about multifamily in general, or specifically about broadband and tech packages? How it can benefit the owners and the investors and the tenants?
So how tough is it? How tough is it to implement this plan? Because if you have a 50-unit apartment or 100-unit apartment, and so 50% people said, yes, I want it, and 50% people say, I don't want it.
So everybody comes from a different angle, but my recommendation, and what most people do, is you put it everywhere. Your tenants will change, but your cabling is your asset, as I mentioned before. You should put it everywhere, and if they don't want it, don't offer it to them. But if you bump it into the rent and say it's an included amenity versus attempt to bill it separately, that is usually the strategy most people will go for. You just say Wi-Fi is included. It's kind of the opposite that you do for electricity and water, where you're trying to get the usage to match the bill, because your fixed cost, if you put Wi-Fi in, does not change. Exactly the same. So if you've got half your people using it, all using it, if you're using a tech package or a self-build, you don't care. You just want as many people to pay the maximum rent as possible and get a really great tenant broadband service. So I personally would give it, I would offer it up to everyone and include it in rent bumps. for nearly all installations.
Yeah, but the problem is this, then you will be on a hook for getting all the calls. Hey, I'm not able to get the bandwidth, I'm not getting the internet. And then if they are gonna start using their hotspot, then definitely they will come back. You have a different kind of tenants. Some
So-
tenants understand and some tenants don't understand, and they're gonna start shouting in your office, and then you will be in trouble.
So if you do a very poor quality installation, you're going to have that. I personally have had ubiquity networks that have been running 2-3 years without even needing a reset. So these things are insanely reliable. They're designed for very, very large scale deployment. It's a very mature technology. It's not like your little AT&T router that's just constantly crashing. And there are ways to mitigate those sorts of sort of brownouts and issues that are super simple to deploy. You just need to make sure you're using a quality provider to put it in. I think in my home infrastructure and a couple of the properties that I've managed, maybe 15 minutes of outage in the last year and a half tops, and most of that was just routine upgrades. So I feel like broadband, when done correctly, is not a pain point you're always going to be getting calls about.
Okay, all right.
All righty. Any other questions there? If not, we're gonna go ahead and share our spinning wheel to choose a winner for our Starbucks gift card. Okay, let's see where it stops.
Miss Miggy.
Lemanuel Turnipseed. Am I pronouncing your name correctly?
Yes, sir.
All right, I see you on the call, so you can expect a gift card within the hour and be a $10 Starbucks gift card. So go ahead.
Thank you so much.
All right, thanks for joining.
Yes.
And if there's no other questions, we'll go ahead and close the meeting for today. And don't forget, Chris Griffith is our speaker for next week. So see y'all next week.
Thanks, Herb and the Eagle team, and thanks everyone.
All righty. Have a great week.
See you guys. Bye-bye.